Some interesting facts about Plato's life. As many know, Plato only wrote dialogues, and the characters in his dialogues express all of his philosophical ideas. Well, there are a series of letters, the most famous of which is the seventh letter, that are attributed to Plato, that people think Plato may have actually written himself. The most reliable is the seventh letter, and its authorship is still in pretty great dispute, but there are some who think that Plato actually wrote it. And this letter actually contains some very interesting biographical facts about Plato's life, perhaps in his own words. He also gives us some advice about how to live philosophically, and the author, possibly Plato, also tells us a bit about his choice of writing style and his general attitude toward philosophy. The translation I'm using for this mysterious seventh letter is by Glenn R. Morrow in Plato's Complete Works, edited by John Cooper. And Cooper explains that even if Plato didn't write this, it must have been written around 354 BC by someone who knew Plato pretty well. So, first, my first main heading here for this seventh letter: interesting biographical facts about events in Plato's life. This begins on page 324. He's writing this to friends and followers of Dion from Syracuse, which is modern-day Sicily, and Plato first traveled there at age 40. And Plato says he wants to explain the origin of his own political convictions. When he was young, he wanted to enter public life, political life. The undesirable constitution of Athens was overthrown and was replaced by the leadership of 51 men, including 30 with absolute powers, among whom were friends, relatives, and acquaintances of Plato. They later came to be known as the 30 tyrants. They turned out to be bad, and they wanted to get Socrates involved, but he refused, at great risk, to avoid doing injustice. And this action of Socrates, this bold, courageous action, inspired Plato. And so Plato drew back from them as well, even though he had these political connections and could have gotten a great deal of power by joining them. They and their constitution were overthrown, and Plato felt a desire to get involved in politics again. But then this new government, the famous Athenian democracy, condemned Socrates to death wrongly for impiety. And so Plato began to see great difficulties in politics, especially the key roles that powerful friends and followers played. He noticed that luck played a big role as well. He noticed a great deal of corruption in politics. So he never stopped thinking about how to solve political problems, but he decided to refrain from active participation in politics. Eventually he became very pessimistic about politics, and he decided that philosophy was really needed to understand justice and to bring it about. Philosophers really needed political power. And this is the conviction he had when he arrived in Italy for the first time. Though when he was there, he initially found a great deal of gluttony and sexual excess, which he was pretty upset about. He thought this was bad for young people and their upbringing, and it was bad for having a city that was tranquil as well. It's bad for peace and harmony in a city. But his friend Dion invited him there, and he imparted to Dion his ideas about what was best politically. And in doing this, he was unknowingly contributing to the destruction of a later tyranny there. Dion thought he could teach the tyrant Dionysus what Plato taught him. And then Dion wrote to Plato asking him to do this and to bring about the philosophical rule of a city. Plato did not want to be, he didn't want to appear to be just a pure theorist. He wanted to prove that he was practical too. This was part of his motivation in going there. And so when he arrived, he found the court of Dionysus in great conflict about Dion, and in the 4th month of Plato's visit, Dionysus charged Dion with plotting against him and exiled him. All the friends of Dion, including Plato, were afraid that they might suffer a similar fate. But Dionysus tried to entice Plato to stay in order not to disgrace him, in order not to disgrace himself, Dionysus, and he even devised a way to prevent Plato from leaving. So he was sort of trapped there by this tyrant Dionysus. And though Dionysus grew very attached to Plato, Plato was never able to overcome Dionysus's resistance to living a philosophical life. He was just too resistant, and Plato couldn't overcome that. So he returned home, but he was summoned back by Dionysus to Sicily again. And it's at this part of the letter, right around 330 to 331, that he starts to give the reader some advice about how to live philosophically. And this is the advice he was trying to impart to this tyrant Dionysus. Plato advises his readers not to waste their time trying to help people or cities who are so far gone that they are not open to counsel. He thinks a wise person ought to warn one's city if it is heading down the wrong path, but not to the point of risking one's life. He also doesn't think we should use violence to bring about a change in constitution. He advises readers to gain mastery over themselves, to become a friend to oneself. He thinks this could result in having great power. Dion returned from exile, and he did a lot of good, but eventually he was betrayed and murdered. And Plato is addressing Dion's friends and followers in this letter. Plato explains to them that the soul is immortal. There are afterlife penalties. It's better to suffer injustice than to do it. He tells us not to rely on those who are not able to attain to our standards of living. He also tells the readers not to seek vengeance. And when it comes to living philosophically and doing philosophy, it's hard. It needs a great deal of determination and persistence. And this final part of the letter gives us some explanation of Plato's writing style and his general attitude about writing philosophy. He explains, starting on 341, why treatises or essays don't work for the philosophy he wants to do. He says he can't put into words what he wants to convey. All of it results from a dialogue between teacher and student. It's not for everyone. He's not writing for the multitude, who would be full of delusion about what they thought they knew as a result of his work. If one is really serious, one's book can't contain one's best thoughts. They must be stored away like one's most prized possessions. There's no danger of these things being forgotten once the soul has really grasped them. So interesting, on publishing, don't publish your best ideas. And finally, after giving more details of his visits to Syracuse and his conflicts with Dionysus, he explains that there were actually plots to kill him, plots to kill Plato. So he planned an escape. Dion asked Plato to help take revenge against Dionysus, and Dionysus, this tyrant, even found out, but didn't put Plato to death. So here's a little account of Plato's adventures in Syracuse, modern-day Sicily, and some of his advice about living philosophically, and also some statement there about his own work, his own writing style. All right, hope you enjoyed it.